In the grand tapestry of American economic history, we find ourselves at a curious juncture. The Federal Reserve, that enigmatic institution that holds the purse strings of our nation's monetary policy, is poised to embark on a journey that could reshape the financial landscape for years to come. As we stand on the precipice of this new era, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on how we got here and where we might be headed. The inflation saga, a tale of peaks and valleys. Let's begin with the protagonist of our story, inflation. For the past few years, this economic boogeyman has haunted the dreams of policymakers and citizens alike. We've seen it surge to heights not witnessed in decades, only to be wrestled back down through a combination of monetary policy wizardry and good old-fashioned American resilience. The latest chapter in this saga brings us some cautiously optimistic news. The Federal Reserve's preferred measure of underlying U.S. inflation, the Core Personal Consumption Expenditures, PCE, price index, rose at a mild pace in July. This index, which strips out the volatile food and energy components that can skew the overall picture, increased by a modest 0.2% from June. Now, I know what you're thinking. David, spare us the economic jargon. What does this mean for the average Joe or Jane? Well, dear reader, allow me to paint a picture. Imagine you're at a carnival, and inflation is that devilishly difficult game where you try to knock down milk bottles with a baseball. For months, it seemed like no matter how hard we threw, those bottles wouldn't budge. But now we're starting to see them wobble. We haven't won the giant stuffed animal yet, but we're making progress. To put it in more concrete terms, on a 3-month annualized basis, a metric that economists favor for its ability to cut through the noise and show us the true trajectory of inflation, the core PCE advanced by just 1.7%. This is the slowest pace we've seen this year. It's as if the economy has been running a marathon at a sprinter's pace, and it's finally catching its breath. The spending spree. Americans open their wallets. But here's where our story takes an interesting turn. While inflation seems to be cooling its heels, American consumers are doing quite the opposite. Inflation-adjusted consumer spending climbed 0.4% in July, showing an acceleration from the previous month. It's as if we've collectively decided that if prices are going to stabilize, we might as well go shopping. This uptick in spending is particularly intriguing when you consider the broader economic context. We've been hearing murmurs of recession for months, yet here we are, swiping our credit cards with the enthusiasm of tourists at a duty-free shop. It's a testament to the resilience of the American consumer, but it also raises some interesting questions about the sustainability of this spending trend. The Fed's dilemma, to cut or not to cut. Now, let's turn our attention to the puppet masters behind the curtain, the Federal Reserve. For months, they've been engaged in a delicate balancing act, trying to tame inflation without sending the economy into a tailspin. They've raised interest rates at a pace that would make even the most seasoned roller coaster enthusiast dizzy. But now it seems they're preparing to change direction. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, in a statement that sent ripples through the financial world, declared that the time has come to start lowering borrowing costs. It's as if he's announcing the end of a long drought. The financial rains are coming, folks, so get your umbrellas ready. But here's where it gets interesting. The Fed isn't just reacting to the cooling inflation numbers. They're also keeping a watchful eye on the labor market, where cracks are beginning to show. It's like watching a game of economic Jenga. They're trying to remove the high interest rate blocks without causing the whole tower to come crashing down. The market's response. A collective shrug? You might think that this news would send the markets into a frenzy. After all, lower interest rates typically mean easier borrowing, which can fuel economic growth. But the response has been surprisingly muted. Stock futures remained higher, and Treasury yields rose only slightly after the report. It's as if the market collectively looked at this news, nodded sagely, and said, "Yeah, we saw that coming." This measured response is telling. It suggests that much of this anticipated policy shift has already been priced into the market. Swaps traders, those financial soothsayers who try to predict the future of interest rates, held steady in their expectations for the total rate cuts they foresee from the Fed for all of 2024. The bigger picture, America's economic crossroads. As we step back and look at the broader economic landscape, we find ourselves at a fascinating crossroads. On one hand, we have inflation that seems to be moderating, consumer spending that's showing signs of life, and a Federal Reserve that's signaling a pivot in its policy. On the other hand, we have lingering concerns about the labor market, questions about the sustainability of consumer spending, and the ever-present specter of global economic uncertainties. It's tempting to view this moment through a purely domestic lens, but we must remember that the U.S. economy doesn't exist in a vacuum. Global factors, from geopolitical tensions to supply chain disruptions, continue to exert their influence on our economic trajectory. The China factor, a dragon in the room. Speaking of global influences, we can't ignore the elephant, or rather the dragon in the room, China. The world's second-largest economy has been experiencing its own set of challenges, from a property market crisis to sluggish consumer spending. These issues in China ripple out across the global economy, affecting everything from commodity prices to manufacturing supply chains. For the U.S., China's economic woes present both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, a slowdown in China could mean reduced demand for American goods and services. On the other hand, it could alleviate some inflationary pressures by reducing competition for global resources. As we navigate this complex economic landscape, policymakers and business leaders alike will need to keep a close eye on developments in China. The interplay between the U.S. and Chinese economies will likely be a significant factor in shaping the global economic narrative in the coming years. The technology revolution, reshaping the economic landscape. Another factor that we can't ignore in this economic equation is the ongoing technological revolution. From artificial intelligence to blockchain, emerging technologies are reshaping industries and challenging traditional economic models. The rise of AI, in particular, presents both exciting opportunities and daunting challenges. On one hand, it has the potential to dramatically increase productivity and drive economic growth. On the other hand, it raises concerns about job displacement and income inequality. As the Fed considers its next moves, it will need to factor in how these technological shifts are affecting the labor market and overall economic productivity. The traditional metrics of economic health may need to be reevaluated in light of these technological disruptions. The green economy, a new frontier. Climate change and the transition to a greener economy represent another significant factor in our economic future. As governments and businesses increasingly commit to reducing carbon emissions, we're seeing the emergence of new industries and the transformation of existing ones. This shift towards a more sustainable economy presents both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, it requires significant investment and may disrupt traditional industries. On the other hand, it opens up new avenues for innovation and growth. The Fed will need to consider how this green transition affects inflation, employment, and overall economic growth as it charts its course forward. The interplay between environmental policy and monetary policy is likely to become an increasingly important area of focus in the coming years. The wealth gap, a persistent challenge. As we discuss the broader economic picture, we can't ignore one of the most pressing issues facing our society: wealth inequality. Despite periods of economic growth, the gap between the richest and poorest Americans has continued to widen. This wealth disparity has significant implications for monetary policy. As the Fed considers lowering interest rates, it will need to weigh how these changes affect different segments of the population. Lower rates can stimulate borrowing and investment, potentially benefiting those with assets. But they can also lead to asset inflation, further widening the wealth gap. Addressing this inequality is not solely the responsibility of the Federal Reserve, but it's a factor that cannot be ignored in discussions of economic policy. The challenge will be finding ways to promote broad-based economic growth that benefits all segments of society. The housing market, a key economic indicator. No discussion of the American economy would be complete without addressing the housing market. It's not just about having a roof over our heads. The housing market is a crucial component of the overall economic picture, affecting everything from consumer spending to construction jobs. The past few years have seen a roller coaster ride in the housing market, with prices soaring to unprecedented heights in many areas, followed by a cooling period as interest rates rose. Now, as the Fed signals a potential shift towards lower rates, all eyes are on how this will impact the housing market. Lower interest rates typically make mortgages more affordable, which can stimulate demand for housing. However, this comes with its own set of challenges. If housing demand increases without a corresponding increase in supply, we could see a return to rapidly escalating home prices, further exacerbating affordability issues in many parts of the country. Moreover, the housing market isn't monolithic. Different regions of the country are experiencing vastly different trends. While some urban areas are grappling with affordability crises, other regions are dealing with population loss and declining property values. As policymakers consider their next moves, they'll need to consider these regional disparities and their broader economic implications. The education economy nexus, investing in human capital. As we look to the future of the American economy, one area that deserves particular attention is education. In an increasingly knowledge-based economy, the skills and capabilities of our workforce are more crucial than ever. The relationship between education and the economy is complex and multifaceted. On one hand, a well-educated workforce is essential for driving innovation and productivity growth. On the other hand, the rising cost of education, particularly at the college level, has led to unprecedented levels of student debt, which can act as a drag on economic growth. As the Fed considers its policy moves, it will need to factor in how these educational trends are affecting the broader economy. Are we investing enough in developing the skills needed for the jobs of the future? How is student debt affecting consumer behavior and economic mobility? These are questions that go beyond the realm of monetary policy but are nonetheless crucial for understanding the long-term trajectory of our economy. The gig economy, redefining work. Another trend that's reshaping our economic landscape is the rise of the gig economy. From ride-sharing services to freelance platforms, more and more Americans are finding work outside of traditional employment structures. This shift has significant implications for how we think about employment, income stability, and social safety nets. It also presents challenges for economic policymakers. How do we measure unemployment in an economy where more people are working multiple part-time jobs or gig roles? How does this affect wage growth and income inequality? As the Fed navigates the current economic landscape, it will need to consider how these changes in the nature of work affect overall economic stability and growth. The gig economy offers flexibility and opportunities for many, but it also comes with uncertainties that could impact consumer spending and economic resilience in times of downturn. The role of government spending, fiscal meets monetary. While our focus has been primarily on monetary policy, we can't ignore the role of fiscal policy in shaping the economic landscape. Government spending and tax policies play a crucial role in driving economic growth and addressing societal needs. In recent years, we've seen unprecedented levels of government spending in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic fallout. As we move forward, debates about the appropriate level of government intervention in the economy are likely to intensify. The interplay between fiscal and monetary policy will be crucial in the coming years. How will government spending and tax policies affect inflation and economic growth? How should the Fed respond to different fiscal scenarios? These are questions that will require careful consideration and coordination between different branches of government. The global economic order, America's role. As we consider America's economic future, we must also consider our place in the global economic order. The United States has long been a leader in shaping international economic policies and institutions. But with the rise of other economic powers and increasing global interconnectedness, this role is evolving. From trade agreements to international financial regulations, America's economic policies have far-reaching effects beyond our borders. As the Fed considers its next moves, it will need to factor in how these decisions might impact global economic stability and America's standing in the world economy. Moreover, global economic trends, from shifts in manufacturing hubs to changes in energy markets, will continue to shape our domestic economic landscape. Navigating these global currents while addressing domestic economic needs will be a key challenge for policymakers in the coming years. The consumer conundrum, spending versus saving. Returning to the consumer spending data mentioned earlier, it's worth diving deeper into what this means for the broader economy. The fact that Americans are opening their wallets more freely is generally seen as a positive sign for economic growth. Consumer spending, after all, accounts for about 2/3 of U.S. economic activity. However, this uptick in spending raises some important questions. Are Americans dipping into their savings to fuel this spending spree? If so, is this sustainable in the long term? Or are we seeing genuine income growth that's allowing for increased spending without depleting savings? Moreover, how does this spending trend align with longer-term financial health? In a world where retirement security is increasingly a personal responsibility rather than a corporate or government guarantee, the balance between current consumption and long-term saving becomes crucial. The Fed will need to consider these factors as it charts its course. Encouraging healthy levels of consumer spending is important for economic growth, but not at the expense of long-term financial stability for American households. The innovation imperative, staying ahead in a global economy. As we look to the future, one of America's greatest strengths has always been its capacity for innovation. From the assembly line to the internet, American innovations have repeatedly reshaped the global economy. But in an increasingly competitive global landscape, maintaining this edge is more challenging than ever. Countries around the world are investing heavily in research and development, education, and technological infrastructure. The Fed's policies can play a role in fostering an environment conducive to innovation. Lower interest rates can make it easier for startups to access capital, for instance. But monetary policy alone isn't enough. We need a comprehensive approach that includes investment in education, research, and infrastructure to ensure America remains at the forefront of global innovation. The demographic shift, an aging America. One factor that often gets overlooked in discussions of short-term economic trends is the long-term demographic shift occurring in America. As the baby boomer generation enters retirement, we're seeing significant changes in the labor market, consumer spending patterns, and demands on social services. This aging population presents both challenges and opportunities for the economy. On one hand, it could lead to labor shortages in certain sectors and increased healthcare costs. On the other hand, it opens up new markets for products and services catering to older Americans. The Fed will need to consider these demographic trends as it formulates its policies. How will an aging population affect productivity, inflation, and economic growth? How might it impact the natural rate of interest, that theoretical interest rate that supports the economy at full employment and maximum output while keeping inflation constant? The urban-rural divide, a tale of two economies. Another important factor to consider is the growing economic divide between urban and rural areas in America. While many cities have seen robust economic growth and rising property values, many rural areas have struggled with job losses, population decline, and eroding tax bases. This divide presents a challenge for policymakers, including those at the Federal Reserve. Monetary policy, by its nature, is a blunt instrument. It can't target specific geographic areas. But the Fed needs to be aware of how its policies might affect different regions differently. Moreover, this urban-rural divide has political implications that could affect economic policy more broadly. How do we craft policies that promote economic growth and opportunity across all regions of the country? This is a question that goes beyond the Fed's mandate but is crucial for long-term economic stability and social cohesion. The future of work, automation, and beyond. As we peer into the future, one of the most significant factors shaping our economic landscape is the changing nature of work. Automation, artificial intelligence, and other technological advancements are reshaping industries and job markets at an unprecedented pace. While these changes bring the promise of increased productivity and new types of jobs, they also raise concerns about job displacement and the need for widespread res-killing of the workforce. The challenge for policymakers, including the Fed, will be to foster an environment that encourages innovation while also ensuring that the benefits of technological progress are broadly shared. The Fed's policies can influence this transition in various ways. For instance, by maintaining a stable economic environment, it can give businesses and workers the confidence to invest in new skills and technologies. But again, monetary policy is just one piece of the puzzle. A comprehensive approach involving education policy, labor market reforms, and perhaps even new social safety net programs may be necessary to navigate this transition successfully. The inflation expectation game. Psychology meets economics. As we circle back to the issue of inflation, it's worth considering the psychological aspects of inflation expectations. Economics isn't just about numbers. It's also about perceptions and beliefs. The Fed's ability to manage inflation isn't just about controlling the money supply or setting interest rates. It's also about managing expectations. If people believe that inflation will remain low and stable, they're more likely to make long-term financial decisions, like taking out a mortgage or expanding a business, that can drive economic growth. This is why the Fed's communication strategy is so crucial. Every word uttered by Fed officials is scrutinized by markets, analysts, and the media. The challenge for the Fed is to be transparent enough to guide expectations without boxing itself into corners that might limit its flexibility to respond to changing economic conditions. As we move forward, this dance between the Fed and the public's inflation expectations will continue to be a critical factor in shaping our economic trajectory. It's a reminder that economics is as much about psychology and communication as it is about interest rates and balance sheets. The energy equation, powering America's future. No discussion of America's economic future would be complete without addressing the energy sector. Energy is the lifeblood of our economy, powering everything from our factories to our smartphones. The ongoing transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources represents both a challenge and an opportunity for our economy. On one hand, the shift towards cleaner energy sources requires significant investment and can disrupt traditional industries. On the other hand, it opens up new avenues for innovation, job creation, and economic growth. The development of new energy technologies could position America as a leader in the global green economy. The Fed's role in this transition is indirect but important. By maintaining a stable economic environment, it can provide the certainty businesses need to make long-term investments in new energy technologies. Moreover, the Fed needs to consider how changes in the energy sector might affect inflation and economic growth more broadly. The debt dilemma, balancing growth and fiscal responsibility. As we look at the broader economic picture, we can't ignore the elephant in the room: the national debt. Years of deficit spending have led to a debt load that, while not immediately threatening, raises long-term concerns about fiscal sustainability. The relationship between debt, economic growth, and monetary policy is complex. On one hand, government borrowing can stimulate economic growth in the short term. On the other hand, high levels of debt can crowd out private investment and limit the government's ability to respond to future economic crises. For the Fed, this presents a delicate balancing act. Lower interest rates can help manage the cost of servicing the national debt, but they can also encourage more borrowing. As the Fed considers its future moves, it will need to weigh these factors carefully. The trade equation, navigating a complex global landscape. International trade has long been a cornerstone of America's economic strength. But in recent years, the global trade landscape has become increasingly complex and contentious. From tariff disputes to concerns about supply chain resilience, policymakers are grappling with how to navigate this new reality. The Fed's role in trade issues is indirect but significant. Exchange rates, which are influenced by monetary policy, can affect the competitiveness of American goods in global markets. Moreover, trade tensions can impact inflation and economic growth, factors that are central to the Fed's mandate. As we move forward, finding the right balance between protecting American interests and maintaining beneficial trade relationships will be crucial. This isn't just a matter for trade negotiators. It's a consideration that will shape the broader economic environment in which the Fed operates. The small business factor, the backbone of the economy. While much of our discussion has focused on macroeconomic trends and policies, we shouldn't lose sight of the vital role that small businesses play in our economy. These enterprises, from local restaurants to innovative startups, are often described as the backbone of the American economy. The health of small businesses can be a key indicator of broader economic trends. They're often the first to feel the effects of economic headwinds and the most vulnerable to sudden shocks. At the same time, they can be engines of innovation and job creation, driving economic growth from the ground up. For the Fed, supporting an environment where small businesses can thrive is crucial. This means not just managing inflation and interest rates, but also ensuring that credit markets function smoothly and that regulatory burdens don't stifle entrepreneurship. The healthcare conundrum, economic impacts beyond the doctor's office. Healthcare is another sector that has outsized implications for our economic future. It's not just about the health of individuals, it's about the health of our economy as a whole. Rising healthcare costs have been a persistent concern, affecting everything from corporate bottom lines to household budgets. The interplay between healthcare policy and economic policy is complex. Changes in healthcare systems can affect inflation, labor market dynamics, and overall economic productivity. For the Fed, understanding these relationships is crucial as it formulates its policies. Moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the profound economic impacts that public health crises can have. As we move forward, building resilience against future health shocks will be an important consideration for economic policymakers at all levels. The education evolution, preparing for tomorrow's economy. We touched on education earlier, but it's worth revisiting this crucial topic. In a rapidly changing economic landscape, the role of education in preparing workers for the jobs of the future cannot be overstated. From coding bootcamps to lifelong learning initiatives, we're seeing a reimagining of what education looks like in the 21st century. For the Fed, the evolution of education has important implications. A more skilled workforce can drive productivity gains and economic growth. At the same time, the rising cost of education and the burden of student debt can act as drags on the economy. As we think about the future of our economy, we need to consider how we can create an educational system that is both accessible and aligned with the needs of a changing job market. This isn't just about K-12 or higher education. It's about fostering a culture of continuous learning that can help our workforce adapt to technological changes and economic shifts. The infrastructure imperative, building the foundation for growth. Infrastructure, from roads and bridges to broadband networks and energy grids, forms the foundation upon which our economy operates. In recent years, there's been growing recognition of the need for significant investment in upgrading and expanding America's infrastructure. Such investment can have multiple economic benefits. In the short term, it can create jobs and stimulate economic activity. In the long term, improved infrastructure can enhance productivity and competitiveness, laying the groundwork for sustained economic growth. For the Fed, infrastructure investment presents both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, it can provide a boost to economic growth and potentially alleviate some inflationary pressures by addressing supply chain bottlenecks. On the other hand, large-scale government spending on infrastructure could have inflationary effects that the Fed would need to monitor and potentially counteract. The resilience factor, preparing for the unexpected. If the events of recent years have taught us anything, it's the importance of economic resilience. From global pandemics to climate-related disasters, our economy needs to be able to withstand and recover from unexpected shocks. Building this resilience involves a range of strategies, from diversifying supply chains to creating robust social safety nets. It also requires a flexible and responsive policy framework that can adapt quickly to changing circumstances. For the Fed, this means not just focusing on its dual mandate of price stability and maximum employment, but also considering how its policies can contribute to overall economic resilience. This might involve maintaining ample reserves to respond to crises or developing new tools to address novel economic challenges. The digital revolution, cryptocurrency, and the future of money. No discussion of our economic future would be complete without addressing the ongoing digital revolution in finance. The rise of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology is challenging traditional notions of money and financial systems. While still a relatively small part of the overall financial landscape, cryptocurrencies have the potential to significantly disrupt how we think about and use money. For the Fed, this presents both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, widespread adoption of cryptocurrencies could complicate the implementation of monetary policy. On the other hand, the underlying blockchain technology could offer new tools for creating more efficient and secure financial systems. As we move forward, the Fed will need to grapple with how to regulate and incorporate these new financial technologies into the broader economic framework. This isn't just about Bitcoin or any single cryptocurrency. It's about the future of money itself, the productivity puzzle, unlocking America's potential. Productivity growth, the ability to produce more with the same or fewer resources, is a key driver of long-term economic prosperity. Yet in recent years, despite rapid technological advances, productivity growth in the U.S. has been disappointingly slow. Understanding and addressing this productivity puzzle is crucial for our economic future. Is it a measurement issue, with our current metrics failing to capture the value created in the digital economy? Or are there structural issues holding back productivity growth? For the Fed, productivity trends have important implications for everything from inflation to the natural rate of interest. As it formulates its policies, the Fed will need to consider how to create an environment that fosters productivity growth without igniting inflationary pressures. The social contract, redefining the relationship between business and society. In recent years, we've seen growing debate about the role of business in society. From discussions about corporate social responsibility to calls for stakeholder capitalism, there's a sense that the old model of shareholder primacy is being questioned. This evolving social contract between business and society has important economic implications. How companies balance the interests of shareholders, employees, customers, and communities can affect everything from wage growth to investment patterns. For the Fed, these shifts in business philosophy and practice are yet another factor to consider in its economic calculations. How might a more stakeholder-focused approach to capitalism affect economic growth, income distribution, and inflation? These are questions that will shape the economic landscape in the years to come. The trust factor: rebuilding faith in institutions. Trust in institutions, from government to business to media, has been on the decline in recent years. This erosion of trust can have significant economic implications, affecting everything from consumer confidence to the functioning of financial markets. For the Fed, maintaining public trust is crucial to its effectiveness. Its policies work in large part because people believe they will work. If that trust erodes, the Fed's ability to manage the economy could be severely compromised. As we move forward, rebuilding and maintaining trust in our economic institutions will be a crucial challenge. This isn't just about the Fed. It's about creating a broader economic system that people believe works for them. Conclusion: navigating the economic crossroads. As we stand at this economic crossroads, the path forward is far from clear. We face a complex array of challenges and opportunities, from managing the transition to a cleaner energy future to harnessing the power of artificial intelligence. The Fed's role in navigating these challenges will be crucial. But it's important to remember that monetary policy is just one piece of the puzzle. Addressing the economic challenges of the 21st century will require a coordinated effort involving fiscal policy, regulatory frameworks, education initiatives, and more. Moreover, as we grapple with these economic questions, we must not lose sight of the human element. Economics is ultimately about improving the lives of people, providing opportunities for fulfilling work, financial security, and the ability to build a better future. As we move forward, we'll need to balance the cold logic of economic models with a compassionate understanding of how policies affect real people's lives. We'll need to foster innovation while ensuring that the benefits of progress are broadly shared. And we'll need to maintain our openness to the world while ensuring that our own workers and communities are not left behind. The task before us is daunting, but it's also exciting. We stand on the cusp of a new economic era, with the potential to create a more prosperous, sustainable, and equitable future. The choices we make now in our policy discussions, in our business practices, and in our personal economic decisions will shape that future. As we navigate these economic crossroads, let's do so with wisdom, compassion, and a commitment to creating an economy that works for all Americans. The road ahead may be uncertain, but with careful navigation and a shared commitment to our collective prosperity, we can chart a course to a brighter economic future. In the words of the great economist John Maynard Keynes, the difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping from old ones. As we face the economic challenges of the 21st century, let's have the courage to question old assumptions, explore new ideas, and reimagine what our economy can be. The future of the American economy is not predetermined. It's a future we will create together, through our policies, our innovations, and our collective efforts. As we stand at this economic crossroads, let's choose the path that leads to a more prosperous, equitable, and sustainable future for all Americans.